Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Tzadik Ches Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We're going to pick up today on two lines off the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch on Tzadik Zayin Amid Beis, Siman Shin Vav Sif Aleph. Our learning should be as chus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanusinim Batzar Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayamu Bein Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yetziam Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'afelu L'Oira Umishibad L'Geula Hashta Bagalo V'Zman Kariv and Emar Amen. Our learning should be as chus for Fu Shalema from Shemer ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak ben Tzion ben Dusha, Tzvi ben Leah Miriam Chavadasa Bas Rezel Serel, Devaira Bas Shasha Bina, and Rivka Bas Shira Leah. They should have a Refu Shalema B'Ser Shar Chayla Yisrael. Our learning should also be a schus for Yonasan ben Michal, Yoel ben Michal, together with all of our other brothers and sisters that find themselves in harm's way, B'chol Makim Shehem. So we began Siman Shin Vav yesterday, and there are really two Isurim that we're going to be discussing here in Shin Vav, Shin Zayin. We brought down the pasuk from Sefer Yeshaya that speaks of Shabbos and says that there are two things that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Mimtzoi cheftzecha v'daber davar. Mimtzoi cheftzecha. Im toshuv mishabbos raglecha. If you will restrain yourself on Shabbos. One of the things that you have to restrain yourself from on Shabbos is mimtzoi cheftzecha. Pursuing your weekday pursuits, mimtzoi cheftzecha, pursuing your needs, and also v'daber davar. There's a type of speaking that is inappropriate to Shabbos. On Shabbos, you don't speak of things that are usher to do on Shabbos, and we're expanding on both of these concepts in these simanim, mimtzoi cheftzecha and daber davar. Now I'm going back a drop in the Mechaber, because even though I read this Mechaber and I read the Ramah, but there's a Mishnah Berurah is cut in Beis that we did not do yesterday. So I'm going to read from the beginning of the line, two lines off the bottom here on Tzadik Zayin Amid Beis. Says the Mechaber, Ein machshichem al hatchum liskar poyelim. You're not allowed to go to the edge of the Tchum Shabbos evening. So that's when it's getting dark. It's starting to go into Motzei Shabbos. When it gets dark, Motzei Shabbos, it's going to be the Zman of Ois Shabbos. So what you want to do is, you want to go all the way to the edge of the Tchum Shabbos on Shabbos evening, so that you should be positioned where the laborers hang out to be hired. You want to know that you're going to get the cream of the crop. You want to know you're going to get the best painter, the best landscaper, the best roofer. So you want to be right over there where they hire the laborers on Motzei Shabbos. Now, not allowed to go out of the Tchum on Shabbos, and certainly you're not going to be Mechal Shabbos, so you're not going to go out of the Tchum. But you want to be all the way at the edge of the Tchum, right by the Zman of Ois Shabbos. You're going to say Baruch Hamavdu B'Kodesh HaKoil, and you're going to hire the cream of the crop. Says the Mechaber, not allowed to do this. Ein machshichem al Tchum liskar poyelim. You're not allowed to go to the edge of the Tchum so that you should be there when it gets dark in order to hire workers. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Beis, Ein machshichem. Hainu, what does this mean? L'karev atzmai b'Shabbos at soif Tchum. You want to bring yourself to the edge of the Tchum, Shabbos evening, or lahachshich sham, so that you should be there at the Zman Ois Shabbos when it gets dark. Why are you doing this? Sheyehei karev limkaim hapayalim l'sacharam b'motzei Shabbos, because you want to be close to where the laborers hang out, so that you should be able to hire them right away after Shabbos. V'atam, the reason that this is aser is, the chol davar she'aser la'asoisai b'Shabbos. Anything that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, afilu hu iser medivrei soifrim, even if it's something that's only an iser d'Rabbanan. The only reason you're not allowed to do it is because of Gzeret d'Rabbanan. Aser lahachshich b'shviloi. You're not allowed to go to the edge of the Tchum, so that you should be there at the Zman Ois Shabbos in order to facilitate performing that act, which would be an Issa D'Rabbanan if you did it on Shabbos. And that is exactly our case. Why? Because you're not allowed to hire workers on Shabbos. Why are you not allowed to hire workers on Shabbos? It's not one of the Lamites Malachas. The reason you're not allowed to hire workers on Shabbos is Gzeret D'Rabbanan. It's mekach memkar. It's doing business. You're not allowed to do business on Shabbos. Brought down different reasons why. The simple one is it's a gzera atu kaisiv. You might come to write. Writing is an iser daraisa on Shabbos. It's one of the lamites malachas. Ksiva, writing, is one of the lamites malachas. Now we're afraid if you're going to engage in business, back in the day for sure, everybody had a pen and paper, so you might write a contract. Who writes a contract? You type it, right? But one of the reasons that are brought down is you might come to the Issa Daraisa of Kaisiv. So you're not allowed to do business on Shabbos. Issa Darabanan. So you're not allowed to hire workers on Shabbos. Since you're not allowed to hire workers on Shabbos, you're not allowed to go to the edge of the Tchum on Shabbos, even though there's no Isser involved in walking to the edge of the Tchum. But you're not allowed to do it in order to facilitate the performance of something that would be an Isser Darabanan on Shabbos right after Shabbos. Why? Because you're walking to the edge of the Tchum and you're positioning yourself next to the laborers on Shabbos. You're pursuing your own non-Shabbos, your own weekday pursuits. You're doing something to facilitate that on Shabbos. And like we said in Mishnah Berurah yesterday, it has to be that it's minkar and milsa. It's recognizable that that's what you're doing. Somebody walks by, I cop what you're doing. You're standing right over there on the street corner where there are 200 laborers. I know why you're there. You're there because you want to hire laborers. Can't do that on Shabbos. Says the Ramah, again, 2 lines off the bottom, Haggah. The same halacha would apply to us, l'tayil. You're not allowed to go for a walk. Now, any issur involved in going for a walk on Shabbos? No. But the l'tayil, you're not allowed to go for a walk. Limtzoi sus, to look for a horse, a svida or a boat, a karain or a wagon. You know that you have to take a trip Motzei Shabbos. You want to have a good horse. You want to make good timing. You got to go on a boat. You want to walk by on the boardwalk. It could be very nice and peaceful on Shabbos afternoon to take a walk on the boardwalk. But you're taking a walk on the boardwalk so you can check out the boats. You want to go check out the cars, check out the rental cars. You're going to go walk by. You have an enterprise rent-a-car down the block from you. You know you're going to want to rent a car, Motzei Shabbos, so you want to go walk. Do I want the Wrangler? Do I want the Suburban? Do I want the Prius? What do I want? I'm checking out the cars. Now, anybody who walks by and sees you by the enterprise lot checking out the cars, it looks very much like you're checking out a car to see what you could rent. Are you allowed to rent a car on Shabbos? No, you're not. So then to do this on Shabbos, says the Ramah, is also because of Mimtzai Chetzecha. Okay, so here we had 2 examples of what's usher because of Mimtzai Chetzecha. Now, the Mechaber is going to give us something that's mutter. Aval, however, Machshech ala Tchum, you could bring yourself to the edge of the Tchum on Shabbos evening so that you should be there when it gets dark. Lahavi behemtoi, in order to bring in your animal that's located outside of the Tchum. Now, let's just remember, your animal has the same Tchum Shabbos that you do, okay? Whatever your Tchum Shabbos is, that's what your animal's Tchum Shabbos is, no matter where your animal was located when Shabbos came in. Now, your animal is outside of the Tchum, and you want to get your animal in from outside of the Tchum. You're not allowed to go out of the Tchum and bring your animal in on Shabbos, right? Obviously, you're not allowed to do that. You can't go out of the Tchum. Not only that, but let's say you have a friend, Shimon. Shimon has a different Tchum than you do. Shimon's Tchum extends to where your animal is located. Okay? So now, where the animal is located is within Shimon's Tchum Shabbos. But it's outside of the animal's Tchum Shabbos. Is Shimon allowed to go to the animal and bring it in from outside its Tchum? No, he's not. So you have a case over here where there's your animal is located outside of the Tchum. Now, to bring it in on Shabbos is a problem. You can't bring it in on Shabbos, but somebody else also can't bring it in on Shabbos, even if for him it's within his Tchum. So to bring the animal in on Shabbos is usher. Now, if we do the math based on what we just learned, we would say, okay, since it's usher to bring the animal in on Shabbos, it should also be usher for you to go to the edge of the tchum on Shabbos, so that you should be prepared and ready to bring the animal in right after Shabbos, right? That would seem to be the myth. We just learned you're not allowed to go to the edge of the tchum on Shabbos to hire workers right after Shabbos. Why? Because you're not allowed to hire workers on Shabbos. Since you can't hire workers on Shabbos, you can't go to the edge of the tchum on Shabbos to facilitate the hiring. So the math would seem to say that over here too, you're not allowed to bring the animal in from outside the tchum on Shabbos. So l'chayra, you shouldn't be allowed to walk to the edge of the tchum on Shabbos to facilitate bringing the animal in from outside the tchum after Shabbos. But that's not the halacha. The halacha is that it's mutter. Says the Makaber, you could go to the edge of the tchum to bring your animal in out from outside the tchum right after Shabbos. Why is that the case? Fascinating reason. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and gimel. Lahavi behemtoi. Even though right now the animal is positioned outside of its tchum, and you're not allowed to bring it in from outside the tchum on Shabbos, going to the edge of the tchum on Shabbos is not called, we don't look at it, that you're being over mimtzai chefzecha, because you're being machshich, you're going to the edge of the tchum on Shabbos to do a davar aser. We don't look at it that way. Why not? Kevan, shemahu borganin heim sukas hashomrim, and I'll teach this and then I'll explain it. If there were watchmen's huts, little shacks that the watchmen stay in when they're doing their guarding during the day, if there were, theoretically, watchman huts, smuchim zelazeh, one close to the other, b'soy shivim armav arba tvachim, within 70 amas and 4 tvachim of one another, hayam mutter lahavia, it would be mutter to bring the animal. Afilu hayam nimshach ba'ofen zeh kamem yilin misayfa ir, even if the animal was very far away from the edge of the city. Misham dekal zeh shayich laha'ir, because then all of this would be considered part of the city limits, within the city limits, and it would be considered within the tchum. Okay, what's the Mishnah Berurah saying? Mishnah Berurah is saying like this. Your problem is that your animal wandered beyond the city limits. It wandered so far out of the city limits that it's out of the tchum, right? The tchum is 2,000 amas beyond the city limits. Your animal is right now located 3,000 amas outside of the city limits. You want to bring it in. So what do you want to do? You want to be machshech ala tchum. You want to go 1,999 amas beyond the city limits before Oy Shabbos, so that you should be as close as possible to your animal when Shabbos ends, so you should be able to get it. We said, l'chayra, according to the math, that should be aser, because you're being machshech b'shvil davar aser, right? You're going to the edge of the tchum on Shabbos to facilitate the performance of something, bringing in the animal, that's aser to do on Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, it's mutter. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, you know why it's mutter? For a very catchy reason. You're right. The animal is located outside of the tchum, but really, it's only based on a technicality. What do I mean that it's based on a technicality? Theoretically, let's say 1,999 amas outside of the city limits, there was a watchman's hut. Okay. Before we go into Chelik Dalid, I want to change that a little. Let's say there's a watchman's hut within 70 amas and 4 tvachim to the city limit. And then another 70 amas and 4 tvachim after that, there's another watchman's hut. And then another 70 amas and 4 tvachim after that, there's another watchman's hut. So from the edge of the city all the way to 3,000 amas beyond the city limits, you have a continuous string of watchmen's huts that are all within 70 amas and 4 tvachim of each other. The halacha would be that that entire area would be considered within the tchum. In other words, in the context of the halachas of tchum Shabbos, it doesn't take a lot to extend the city limits. You have just a string of watchmen's huts going out of the city limits, and they're all within 70 amas and 4 tvachim, one to each other. That extends the city limits. So therefore, theoretically, if this string of watchmen's huts actually existed all the way to where your animal is located, would it be usher to bring the animal in? No. The animal would be considered within the tchum. And then it would be mutter. So what's the Mishnah Berurah saying? What the Mishnah Berurah is saying is, you know why the Mechaber says it's mutter to be machshech al tchum, to bring in your animal from outside of the tchum? I'll tell you why. Because, and we alluded to this already in yesterday's shir, this isser to bring the animal in from outside of the tchum, it's not an isser that's based on the idea that transporting the animal from 3,000 amas outside the city limits to within the city limits is intrinsically an isser malacha. It's not intrinsically an isser malacha. I'll prove it to you. If there were a string of watchmen's huts going all the way to where the animal is located, it would be 100% mutter to transport the animal from point A outside the city to point B inside the city. So the transporting the animal from point A, 3,000 amas beyond the city limits, to point B within the city limits is not inherently an act which is usher. It is usher because of an external technicality. What's the external technicality? It happens to be that from the city limits to where the animal is, there's nothing. It's barren. Oh, since it's barren, it's considered outside the tchum. So now the same act, which would be mutter if the watchmen's huts were there, is now usher because the watchmen's huts are not there. Is there any difference in the transportation of the animal? Is there any difference in how much effort it's going to take to transport the animal? Is there any difference in what the animal is going to have to do? No, it's all the same. There's an external technicality, which is the technical boundaries of the city based on Chelik Dalid of Mishnah Berurah, what constitutes the boundaries of the city and what doesn't. Therefore, explains the Mishnah Berurah, when you're machshech al tchum in order to bring the animal in, yes, it's true. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to bring the animal in. It's takin issa d'rabbanan of issa tchumen to bring the animal in on Shabbos from outside the tchum. But it's this funny kind of isser, which is an isser that has an external piece to it, which could, theoretically, render the same act mutter. And therefore, we don't call it being machshech al tchum b'shvil davar ha'asa. Let's go weiter in this Mishnah Berurah. The Kevin Sheish Takanta Yidei Borganin, since theoretically this act could be rendered mutter if there were watchmen's huts there, lakach mutter lahachshech afilu b'loy borganin, therefore it becomes mutter to be machshech al hatchum, even if the watchmen's huts are not there. Because this rule that you can't be machshech al hatchum to facilitate the performance of something that would be also on Shabbos is only if there's no way to do that act on Shabbos, but oifen heter. So there is no way to hire laborers on Shabbos, but oifen heter. You're not allowed to hire laborers on Shabbos. There's no external way to make that mutter. It's not that you're not allowed to hire them if they're standing on that street corner, but you are allowed to hire them if they're standing on that street corner. No, you're not allowed to hire laborers on Shabbos. Therefore, you can't be machshech al tchum to hire laborers. But to bring in an animal from outside the tchum, right? So take out the words from outside the tchum. To bring in an animal from its location, from 3,000 amas away from what we call the city limits, to bring in an animal from there to bring it home, it could be usher, it could be mutter, right? You got to get the tchum specialist in the local koil, and he'll tell you, I looked on Google Maps, and there's a hut here, and there's a hut here, and there's a hut there, so suddenly it's mutter. So there's an oifen it could be mutter, there's an oifen in which it's usher. So therefore, even if the truth is in reality, the facts on the ground are that it's usher to bring it in on Shabbos, since it could be mutter, you're allowed to be machshech al tchum in order to facilitate that. Okay, continuing here in the Mechaber top line, Tzadik Ches Amud Aleph. Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say, She'em eina behema yechola leilech baraglayim. Let's say you have an animal that's outside the tchum, but it's an animal that cannot walk on its own. Kiganshu tle katan. It's a young shepsela, it's a young sheep, who can't walk from outside of the tchum into the city on its own, then eina rashay lahachshich. Then Yutaka would not be allowed to go to the edge of the tchum to facilitate being close to it to bring it in after Shabbos. Why? De'ena rashay lahavi, because this would be something which would be usher to do on Shabbos, and there would be no way to render it mutter. You know why? Because this is not just an isser of tchum. This is also an isser of muktzah. The asal taltal balachayim shehem muktzim. So in other words, your horse is outside of the tchum, so you want to be makshech al tchum in order to bring it in. There's one isser involved on Shabbos, the isser tchumen. But if you have a young shepsela that's outside of the tchum on Shabbos, which cannot walk from its present location back to the city, so that means that you would have to carry it. Now to do it on Shabbos involves two isurim. It involves the issa tchumen, which we could get around, but it also involves the issa muktzah. The issa muktzah, there's no way to get around on Shabbos, therefore you can't be makshech al tchum to perform it after Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Dalit. V'yesh oimrim she'im kulei alma b'odim bazeh. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber wrote this in a very funny way. He wrote v'yesh oimrim. There are those that say, it sounds like it's a matter of dispute. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is not a matter of dispute. Kulei alma b'odim bazeh. Everybody agrees to this. V'nakat lashit v'yesh oimrim. The reason the Mechaber wrote it as a v'yesh oimrim, mipnei shekein derech ha-Mechaber b'makom shalei nimtza din zeh mefurish b'shar poskim. This is one of these very yesodistic of Mishnah Berurahs. Chavetz Chaim tells you here a rule in how the Mechaber wrote things. He says you should know that it is the style of the Mechaber that when you don't find a halacha written mefurish, written clearly in other poskim, you only find it written clearly in one place. In this instance, it's a Tosfos. So you only find it written clearly in a Tosfos, even though nobody argues on it. He calls that a yesh oimrim. What the Mechaber wants to say over here is, afilu hayu mechitzais shleimais. Take away the problem of tchumen. Even no matter where the animal would be, even if the animal is in the city, it would be also to pick up this animal because of muktzah. So when he's makshech al tchum, in order to carry the animal, you can't be mashech al tchum in order to carry an animal, because you're not allowed to carry an animal on Shabbos. It's muktzah, and there's no way to render it mutter. Ois kat vav the asal taltal. V'gam bazeh ain't iser mishum b'mitzay chefzecha, and the Mishnah Berurah is just reminding us here. We're dealing with the iser of being mashech al hatchum, which is the iser of b'mitzay chefzecha, of pursuing your weekday pursuits. Points out the Mishnah Berurah, reminds us what we learned yesterday. Remember, it's only usher to go be machshech al tchum, to be positioned at the edge of the tchum so you can carry the animal in after Shabbos, if it's minkar milsa, if it's recognizable what you're doing at the edge of the tchum. Or if you're standing all the way mamish at the edge of the tchum, so it's very obvious, what are you doing over there? But if nobody's going to chop what you're doing, if a mamish looks like you're just going for a walk, even if in reality you're going to check out the horses, or in reality you're walking over there so you should be close to your nebuch lost animal, then shari, then it would be mutter. So in other words, and I still want to read this Aruch HaShulchan, I have to get to it at some point. I see we're already 23 minutes into the share. I don't know if we're going to get to it today. But I do want to get to this beautiful Aruch HaShulchan that speaks about that even though there are technically things that are mutter, it's mutter to think about business here on Shabbos, but you shouldn't. And the gewaldige schar that somebody gets if he doesn't do it. Over here what the Mishnah Berurah is saying is, remember, if nobody's going to chop, if there's an enterprise rent-a-car down the block from you, but you always go for walks on Shabbos, and you always walk by the enterprise rent-a-car. So now you're going to walk by the enterprise rent-a-car, and while you walk by, you're going to look in the yard to see what they have in stock, so that you know what you could get tomorrow. That's not usher because of Mimtzah Chefzecha. Why? Because it's not Minkar Milsa. And remember what we said yesterday. This whole Isser of Mimtzah Chefzecha is a gewaltige chiddush. We're asering you doing something which is not a meleches isser on Shabbos at all. You're going for a walk. There's no isser malacha here at all. But we're asering it because of mimsa chetzecha. But there has to be some level of activity involved. It has to be at least minker and milsa. It's obvious that, oh, look, he's checking out the cars on Shabbos. But if you always go for a walk past the Enterprise rent-a-car lot, now you're also going for a walk past the Enterprise lot, and you're not stopping over there and leaning on the fence and checking it out. No, you're walking by like you always do. So then it's not Minka Ramilsa. So then if you look in the lot and you see the Wrangler, the Suburban, the Prius, and the pickup truck, and you think in your mind, which one would I want? That's Hirab Alma. That would be mutter. Okay, let's go weiter. Sif Beis. Again, another case. Your animal is outside of the tchum, and you want to get your animal back inside the tchum. Your animal is outside of the tchum. You're worried about the welfare of your animal. You're allowed to call it so that it should come. So your cow, Betsy, is outside the tchum. You're allowed to go to the tchum. Now, are you allowed to go outside the tchum and bring it in? No, for two reasons. First of all, if your animal is outside its tchum, that means it's also outside your tchum. So, right away, you can't go out and get the animal because you can't go out of the tchum. Can somebody else who, for him, the animal is within his tchum, could he go bring it in? No, because no yid is allowed to go get an animal and bring it in from outside of its tchum. Not only that, you're not even allowed to go to an animal that's outside of its tchum and take it and lead it out of its talanamas. Once the animal is outside its tchum, really it's not allowed to go out of its talanamas. But you are allowed to stay within your tchum and call it, Betsy, Betsy. And if it comes, that's okay. That you're allowed to do. Says the Mishnah Berurah Zayin Yochel. Now, you might think that this would be aser. Why would you think it's aser? You're not doing anything. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you would think it's aser. V'loi gazminan, we do not make a gzera. Dilma yetze ba'aleh chutz l'tchum kedei la'achnisa l'sachatchum. There would seem to be room for a very logical gzera here. And that is, if we're going to allow you to use your voice and call Betsy in, you're going to get frustrated when Betsy doesn't listen. And then when you get frustrated, you might go out of the tchum and bring your animal in. So l'chayru would be a very logical gzera here, but we don't make such a gzera. Now, v'meina sheimas le'lavai. Let's say the animal's not listening to you. Betsy, Betsy, she doesn't want to come. And you're worried about the animal's welfare. Maybe it's in danger of wolves. Maybe it might wander off and get lost. So you're worried about the animal's welfare. You tried to do this b'oifen heter gomer. You went to the edge of the tchum and you tried to call it in, and it won't come. Mutter lahachnisa al yidei eino Yehudi. You're allowed to do amira la'akum here and ask an eino Yehudi to go do something which for you yourself to do would be aser. You're allowed to ask an eino Yehudi to go out of the tchum and bring the animal in biyadayim into the tchum. You're allowed to do that. Now, let's just realize what this really is. This is really a shvus to shvus b'makom hatzorich or b'makom hefsid. It's a double derabanan because the Issa Tchumin is a derabanan and Amir La'akum is a derabanan. So it's an Amir La'akum, which is a derabanan on an Issa Tchumin of a derabanan, and this is a makom hefsid. You're worried about the welfare of the animal. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you're allowed to do this. He brings it down for the Pri Megadim, and in the Shar Tzion, the Chavetz Chaim makes an interesting point. He says, if you remember, yesterday we learned about giving your animal to a shepherd. And the Mishnah Berurah brought down a Pri Megadim, where he said that the Pri Megadim was mesopik. Are you allowed to instruct the shepherd? I know that there's good pasture outside of the tchum. I'm instructing you on Shabbos, take the animal outside of the tchum and let it graze over there. The Mishnah Berurah said, it's an Oiskot Nayin Test on Sadik Zayin and Beis, that the Pri Megadim is mesupik whether you're allowed to do this or not. V'nochel lahachmer. It would be better to be machmer. But over here, the Pri Megadim says, if your animal is outside of the tchum and you're worried about its welfare, and you tried calling it in and it won't come, says the Pri Megadim over there, you are allowed to instruct an eino Yehudi to go out of the tchum and bring it in. Why? It seems because it's a makom hefsid. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, Aval also lachnisa al yedei Yisrael. But if you tried to call the animal in and it won't come, Could you have a yid go bring the animal in? Now again, the Mishnah Berurah is not discussing you going and bringing the animal in, because again, I'm going to say it's drittenmal. If the animal is outside of its tchum, the animal is also outside your tchum, right? But how about for another yid who the animal is not outside his tchum? No, you can't do that. Even a different yid, she'ein ba'aleh, who's not its owner, she'etzloihu b'seichat tchum. So legabe Shimon, the animal is within Shimon's tchum. You still can't ask Shimon, do me a favor. My animal, it's outside my tchum, but it's inside your tchum. Could you please go get my animal back inside the tchum? You're not allowed to do that. Because the bottom line is the animal is the same tchum as you, which means that the animal is outside its tchum. Once the animal went outside its tchum, no yid is allowed to go and have the animal go more than Dalet Amas, because it's going outside of its tchum. Shvisas Behemtai. You're not allowed to have an animal go outside of its tchum. Okay, going to Sif Gimel. Very interesting sif over here. Now, in this sif, we're going to touch very much on the second concept that we're discussing in this siman and the next, and that is daber davar. The prohibition that your speech on Shabbos is not supposed to be the same as your speech during the week, which also means that you're not allowed to discuss things on Shabbos that are usher to do on Shabbos. Okay? So now, says the Mechaber Sif Gimel. Machshichen ala tchum, lasois tzarchei kala oy tzarchei meis. For example, lahavi loy arayin v'tachrichen. There's going to be a chas in a Motzei Shabbos. And you just found out that the kala doesn't have a gown. Now, the tailor shop is right outside of the tchum. And that's where the sewing takes place, and that's where the beautiful white and lace fabric for the kala's gown are. And this chasana is supposed to take place right after Shabbos. So you could be makshich on the tchum. You could go all the way to the edge of the tchum, Shabbos evening, in order to facilitate that right after Shabbos you should jump into the tailor shop and sew the gown. Are you allowed to sew a gown on Shabbos? No, it's a daraisa, right? So how could you be makshich al tchum? The answer is that over here, you're doing not cheftzecha. You're not going to the edge of the tchum to facilitate your pursuits. You're going to the edge of the tchum to facilitate the Rabbeinu Shalom's pursuits. This is cheftze shamayim. This is dvar mitzvah. Hachnosas kala. You have a mace. The mace needs an aron. It needs a casket. The mace needs tachrichin. It needs shrouds. The mitzvah, you have to bury the mace as soon as possible. You want to make the kvura Motzei Shabbos. You don't have an aron. You don't have tachrichin. Again, the tailor shop for the tachrichin is right outside the tchum. The carpentry shop to make the aron is right outside the tchum. You want to be makshich ala tchum so that immediately after Shabbos, immediately after Ois, you could go outside of the tchum and do malacha daraisa. You want to do carpentry work. You want to do tailoring. You're allowed to do it. Why? Because it's not cheftzecha. It's cheftze shamayim. So that is very clear. That's a very simple halacha. Halacha number 1, Sif Gimel, very simple. Now, the Mishnah Berurah has to make a point over here, because if you look at the words of the Mechaber, it says, Machshichen ala tchum, you could go be by the edge of the tchum by Zman Oy Shabbos, lasois, to make tzarchei kala. So that means to make the gown. It's a daraisa. Oy tzarchei meis, or for the purposes of tzarchei meis, lahavi loy, aron of tachrichin, to bring an aron in shrouds. A simple reading of the words of the Mechaber sounds like what the Mechaber is saying is, you could be makshich al tchum to make the gown for the kala. You could be makshich al tchum to bring the aron and the tachrichin for the mace. It doesn't say to make the aron and tachrichin for the mace. Points out the Mishnah Berurah, no, the word lasos goes on both. In both cases, you're being makshich al tchum to do Isurei Daraisa. You're going to make the gown, you're going to make the shrouds, you're going to make the aron. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lasais, Oy Tzarchei Meis, Hi lasois, this word lasois at tzarchei meis namikoi is also going on the tzarchei meis. The machshir kidei l'sakdon v'lahavion maher. It means that you're going to the edge of the tchum so you could be positioned right by the carpentry shop and right by the tailor shop to make them. V'afilu hachi mutter, and still in all, this is mutter to be machshir al tchum. Why? The cheftzei shamayim hu, because this is not cheftzecha. This is cheftzei shamayim. This is dvar mitzvah. Because remember, if the case would be just lahavi, right? Let's say the case would be that the chassid is supposed to be right after Shabbos, and the gown is right outside the tchum. The gown is made. You don't have to make the gown. The gown is made. It's hanging in the tailor shop, right outside the tchum. So you want to be makshich al tchum for what? So that right after Shabbos, you could go outside of the tchum, get the gown off the hook, and bring it in. That's 100% mutter. Wait a second, Rabbi Weiss. Why is it mutter? It's not mutter on Shabbos to bring a gown in from outside the tchum. Yeah, but this is the same as what we learned at the beginning of this year, that you could be machshich al tchum to bring your animal in from outside of the tchum. Why? Because theoretically, if there would be watchmen's huts, you would be allowed to bring in the animal from outside the tchum. Same thing here. You could be makshich al tchum to bring in the gown, right, on Shabbos, even if this wasn't for a dvar mitzvah. You want to go pick up your suit. It's not for a dvar mitzvah. Your suit is hanging in the tailor shop right outside the tchum. And you want to bring it in on Motzei Shabbos, not for a dvar mitzvah. You want to wear it Sunday morning. Not for a dvar mitzvah, so you want to be positioned at the edge of the tchum in order to pick up your suit, to get your suit out from the shop, right? You're allowed to do that. Why? Because theoretically, if there were watchmen's huts, it wouldn't be positioned outside of the tchum. It would be inside the tchum. That's not called being mashich b'shvil davar aser. So the point that the Mishnah Berurah is making is, there would be no need for the mechaber to tell me that you could be mashich al tchum to pick up the aron from outside of the tchum because it's a dvar mitzvah. No. You could be mashich al tchum to pick up something that's located outside of the tchum, even if it's not for a dvar mitzvah. Why? Because theoretically, if there were watchmen's huts, it wouldn't be outside the tchum. The chiddush over here is that you could be mashich al tchum in order to do an issa daraisa. You could be mashich al tchum in order to build the casket because it's cheftzei shamayim. That's the chiddush over here. Okay, weiter. Ois katan. No, now we go weiter in the mechaber. It says the mechaber weiter. So we're 4 lines down. This is where things get a little bit complicated. V'yachal loymar lechaveroi. You're allowed to tell your friend. And now we're starting to touch upon the isser of daber dovar, to speak about things that are inappropriate to Shabbos. But remember, we're talking here about tzarchei kala and tzarchei ames. So now we're talking about cheftzei shamayim. We're talking about dvar mitzvah. Says the mechaber, v'yachal loymar lechaveroi. You're allowed to say to your friend, sheyachshich, that he should go to the edge of the tchum, kidei sheyaviloi, so that he should be able to bring you the tzarchei kala and the tzarchei mace. Now the Mishnah Berurah is going to point out again, this doesn't mean that you're telling your friend, position yourself at the edge of the tchum so you could bring the gown from outside of the tchum, or so that you could bring the aron from outside of the tchum. Because again, I don't have to repeat myself. That would be mutter even if it would be a davar rishus, even if it's not a dvar mitzvah. What the mechaber is saying is, the same way you could position yourself at the edge of the tchum, so that right after Shabbos you could do the malacha of making the gown and making the aron. So we're being matir mimtzoi cheftzecha, because it's not cheftzecha, it's cheftzei shamayim. So too when it comes to daber dovar. If you're not the carpenter, if you're not the tailor, you could go to your friend the tailor and you could say, listen, go after mincha to the edge of the tchum so that you should be right next to your shop after Shabbos so that you could jump into the shop and you could finish the gown. So that we should have the gown. So we're being matir daber dovar. You're talking about a dvar iser. You're talking about tailoring on Shabbos. You're instructing the tailor to do the tailoring. And you're giving that instruction over on Shabbos. That's daber dovar. But it's cheftzei shamayim, so you're allowed to do it. Says the Mishnah Berurah's cut and test, Kedei sheyavi loy. Again, the mechaber doesn't mean just that you're instructing him to bring it. Hainu kedei sheyasaknon sham v'yavi loy. He means that you're telling the tailor, go sew the gown and bring it. Says the mechaber weiter, 4 lines down to the end of the line. V'yachal loymer loy. You could also tell a shliach, a courier. You could tell him, Lech l'mokim pliny l'machar. Now we're talking about a case where the chasana is on Sunday, right? But preparations need to be made for the chasana. You could tell somebody, Lech l'mokim pliny l'machar. Go to Lakewood tomorrow to buy a gown. V'im loy motzasa b'mokim pliny, right? You run the local achnasas kala. You have a kala who needs a gown. You could tell your courier, go to Lakewood, go to Barpa, go to Muncie tomorrow. And if you don't find a gown to buy in Muncie, go to Lakewood and go buy a gown in Lakewood. If you can't find a gown for a money, go buy a gown for 200 money. So what are you doing over here? You're talking about Mekach u'Memkar. It's very clear that what you're doing is you're instructing your shliach to go make a purchase after Shabbos. Now, are you allowed to make purchases on Shabbos? You're not allowed to make purchases on Shabbos. Mekach u'Memkar. It's a d'Rabbanan. You're not allowed to make purchases on Shabbos. You're instructing somebody to make purchases. Now, you're not telling them to make purchases on Shabbos. You're not allowed to make purchases on Shabbos. You're telling them to make the purchases on Sunday. But you're talking about a davar aser. You're talking about making purchases, which is also on Shabbos, right? You're talking about it on Shabbos, davar davar. But it's mutter because it's cheftzei shamayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois katan yud. You're telling your shliach, lech l'makom pliny. Go to this and this place. Go to Muncie. Pirish. What does that mean? What exactly are you telling him? Leilich sham v'liknois. It's very clear that what you're doing is you're telling him, go buy a gown, which is also on Shabbos. You're not allowed to tell somebody, listen, go tomorrow and pick up a nice prime rib, so I should be able to put it up for the Purim Suda. You're not allowed to say that on Shabbos. You're not allowed to tell your son on Shabbos, listen, you have time tomorrow, go to this and this store and go buy me meat for Purim. Why? Davar davar. You're talking about making purchases on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that. Ubedvar mitzvah shari. But for a mitzvah, cheftzei shamayim. For achnasas kala, it's mutter. Aval halicha greda, but just to tell somebody, go to Lakewood tomorrow. Assuming, I'm not talking about driving, that would be a problem. So it's it's a walking distance. You know what? I have a great idea. Meet me at the park tomorrow. Go to the park tomorrow. Nothing wrong with that. Aval halicha greda, feel the dvar reshush shari loymar. You're allowed to tell somebody to go someplace. There's no isser involved in that. Siman Shin Zayin Sivches. In Shin Zayin Sivches, the mechaber says, you could tell your friend, Lekrach ploini ani hoylech lemachar. I'm going to this and this place on Shabbos. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying we're talking about that on Shabbos. Over there, it points out that you could even say that if it's going outside of the tchum, again, because of the watchman's hut's technicality. Okay. Ois katan yud aleph. So you're telling the shliach, go lemachar, go tomorrow. Aval b'Shabbos atzmai. But to tell a shliach to make purchases for a dvar mitzvah on Shabbos, go buy a gown on Shabbos, also. That's definitely also afshul dvar mitzvah. You're not allowed to make purchases on Shabbos, even though it's only an issa d'Rabbanan. You're not allowed to make purchases on Shabbos, even for a dvar mitzvah. Mimtza chefzecha, we could be matir, because chefzecha, but chefze shamayim amuter. Dabar davar, we could be matir for the same reason. But we're not going to be matir, bekach umemkar. A little bit weiter. Says the mechaber weiter. Ubelvad. So, what have we said over here? We said you're in charge of the local hachnasas kala. You could tell your shliach, go to Muncie tomorrow and buy a gown. So, dabar davar, but it's chefze shamayim, it's mutter. Now, the Mishnah Berurah puts in some caveats. The mechaber puts in some caveats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down. It says the mechaber. Ubelvad shelo yasker lo schom mekach. But you cannot name a price What does that mean? Koloimar, says the Mechaber, what do I mean? Shelo yomer lo sach yadua. You can't tell the shliach a set price. Shelo lo haisef alav. You can't tell him, buy a gown for $500, but don't spend more than $500. That you cannot do. Why not? Says the Mishnah Berurah cut yud beis, sach yadua, lefi she'ein b'ktsisa shel mitzvah, rak atzolos b'moinoi, or l'kach oser. When you tell the shliach, don't spend more than $200, that's not daber davar of a dvar mitzvah. Go buy a gown for the kala, that's daber davar for a mitzvah. Don't spend more than $500 is to save you money. That's not for the dvar mitzvah. Now the Ramah is going to quibble with that maybe a little bit, but says the Mechaber, that's not a dvar mitzvah. That's saving you money. That you're not allowed to do. Says the Mechaber weiter. V'chein, similarly. Let's say the place that you're sending the shliach to go buy the gown, you've done business with them before. V'chein, im lokach mimenu b'shmoina. Let's say you already spent 8 money. Well, let's put it into our terms. Let's say you already spent $800 at this gown place. Don't tell the shliach, go to the gown place. Tell the guy go tomorrow to the gown place. Tell him, listen, I already bought gowns from you for $800. Give my shliach another gown, and now I'll owe you $1,000. Why? Because, again, that's not dvar mitzvah. Why are you talking about this? Why are you talking about how much you already owe the tailor and how much the final bill is going to be? None of that is tzarchei mitzvah. The tzarchei mitzvah is go buy a gown. This is not tzarchei mitzvah. So you can't add this to the conversation. Says the Mishnah Berurah, I's cutting yud beis. No, I's cutting yud gimel. Lo yarma loy, we did that. Lo yarma loy tainli. Don't say, give me another gown and I'll owe you more money. Return to Loimer. Right? For the words of the Mechaber, it sounds like you're talking to the tailor, but you're not talking to the tailor. You're talking to your shliach, who you're sending to go to the tailor on Sunday. That the tailor should give you another gown for another $200. His numbers are 8 and 10. Because this discussion has no angle of mitzvah in it. Let's just finish the sif. Hagah, however, at the end of the day, the Ramah says, V'im ef shaloi ele im ken yaskaloi schom mekach mutter b'chol inyan da tzarchei mitzvah. But the Ramah says, if there's no other way to accomplish this other than by giving the shliach a price, if the only way the shliach is going to be able to go get a gown is if you tell the shliach, look, spend $500, get a gown. But if you don't give him instruction and you don't tell him how much he's going to spend, he might go to the tailor and not end up getting a gown because he's going to come back, he's going to say, I don't know, the only gown that there was $475. I didn't know if you wanted to spend so much, so I didn't buy a gown. That, the Ramah says, if you have to name the price in order to accomplish the tzarchei mitzvah, you could name the price. However, continues the Ramah, v'yesh oisra b'chol inyan, but there are those that say no. You simply cannot name a price. V'chein ikar, and that's the ikar halacha. Why? Because by naming a price, that's already mekach u'memkar. You're already crossing the border from simple daber davar to real bona fide mekach u'memkar. Once you're talking prices, it's like you're doing mekach u'memkar on Shabbos. That we can't be matir. There's no heter to do mekach u'memkar l'tzarchei mitzvah on Shabbos. There's only a heter daber davar. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois katan yudalid b'chol inyan as chamekach koi. When the Ramah says over here, yesh oiser b'chol inyan, he's talking about naming a price. The sfira lahu, because these opinions hold. The kevad dehu derech u'memkar mamish. Now you're already coming to bona fide mekach u'memkar. Lo yitiru b'shum gavni afilu l'tzarech mitzvah. We're going to stop over here. Continue next time with Sif Daled. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This list of limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Rabbeinu Shalom should send Yeshuas, Refuas, Parnasa, Shidduchim to all those in need. And we should be zeicher to see the Bias Gal Tzedek. B'mher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.